Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross, in the studio. My guest this evening is Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Welcome back again, Chris.
Evening, Gordon. How are we?
I'm very well, thank you, Chris. Now, we're just going to go straight into the coronavirus update, as we usually do at this time. As of 2 o'clock today, a total of 602,795 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 581,906 were confirmed negative, 20,889 were positive. There are now 101 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There is just one reported death amongst people who tested positive today. Now, this will be an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all of those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 259 were in hospital last night, 4 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have now died from complications caused by coronavirus COVID-19 infections now stands at 2,496. This number only includes those who have died in hospital, having received a positive test for the virus. The latest daily UK figures show that 41,527 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness. This is an increase of 13 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. Now, a reminder to viewers that if you wish to take part in the programmes, you can now do so using social media, especially Twitter if you wish. Details of how to contact us should appear on your screen just now. And now to our first story this evening. A leaked document confirms the Tory attack on the foundations of devolution. A leaked document setting out the UK government's post-Brexit internal market power grab proposals confirmed Tory plans to overrule the democratic will of the Scottish Parliament and to deliver the biggest raid on devolution since 1999, the SNP has warned. The proposed legislation sets out devolved areas that could be under threat from the Westminster Tory power grab, including key areas such as food safety, minimum pricing, environmental policy, and animal health and welfare. With health campaigners, farmers, and groups across Scotland already setting out their opposition to these plans. The Scottish Parliament had previously voted overwhelmingly to reject the UK government's plans by 92 votes to 31, leaving the Tories isolated. Commenting, Ian Blackford MP, the SNP's Westminster leader, said, "The leaked pictures confirm what we've been warning about since these proposals first emerged. The Tories are preparing to overrule the democratic will of the Scottish Parliament and are laying the groundwork for the biggest raid on devolution since 1999. While Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie said that the Tories were taking their contempt for Scotland to new levels. Well, Chris, this story broke this afternoon, and I don't think this is a surprise. What's your reaction to this news that there's been a leak of the Tories' plans to basically introduce this new internal market bill?
Well, I'm more not surprised at the news, but I'm surprised that there's a leak coming out of the Tory party. We knew that this was the case all along. We knew that they were going to take basically a scythe to the Constitution at this moment in time, as well as the devolved settlement. And, this should be, if anybody needs it, this should be a wake-up call to what the Tories actually want or what they propose to do.
So, Chris, what will this new bill of the Tories actually mean in real life for Scots? I imagine that this is some way of controlling the output or the legislative output of the Scottish Parliament in some way.
Well, it will undoubtedly reduce the powers that are currently in Holyrood just now, and admittedly we all know that there's not enough of them, but this will reduce the powers to no more. You could say it's akin to any of the regional county councils. It'll basically turn Holyrood into a talking shop.
So you believe that? So, Chris,
Sorry.
how realistic is that prospect, do you think, of if this bill were imposed on Scotland? How much damage would it do to the daily running of the Scottish Parliament and what it was able to achieve?
Well, that's exactly. I can't put it any plainer than the way that I see it now, Gordon. Is the fact that we would, if Scotland thinks that it's got one hand tied behind its back at this moment in time, then you're going to see the fact that Scotland will have two hands behind its back, and it will also have a gag over its mouth as well.
Chris, can you clear something up for me? Is this bill, this internal market bill, likely to affect the upcoming referendum bill, which is about, which Nicola has already announced she will be laying before Parliament? Will it affect that?
It has the potential to affect that, Gordon, yes, because there is nothing done in Westminster without having the desired effect of keeping Scotland on the drip, shall we say. And this will cause many more hurdles because, as I say, if the powers within Holyrood are reduced to no more than a county council, then it's a bit like asking Herefordshire to stand up to the Westminster government and say you're not building a new motorway through our town
Yeah.
centre.
So could does it have the potential, Chris, to actually stop the devolution? To stop the independence referendum bill from going through?
It, it possibly could, to the point where it would make it almost an almost necessity that Scotland would need to seek external help. And I mentioned that obviously we've got an eminent QC within the party who's well versed in taking the Westminster government to court. I've often said on Twitter, look, if this ends up in court, this ends up in court. That is something else that we have got to be prepared about. Because make no mistake, the Westminster government are not going to make it easy for Scotland to be an independent country. And I find that in a bizarre disparity to if you look at India.
Yeah.
Basically they just once they had raped and pillaged their way through India and were completely done with it, they then just said to Gandhi,
Okay.
right, yeah, well, you can just have it. Equally, it took a long struggle in Ireland, and for them to get away from it. And I don't think that we've got any
Okay.
ideas of replicating that issue.
Okay,
But
Chris.
make no mistake, they will do whatever they can do.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris. Now, thankfully, we've just had the news that Dave Tucker's joining us again this evening. Welcome back to the programme, Dave. I'm glad you could finally join us.
Hello. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're very quiet, Dave, at the moment. We'll come back to you in a moment. But Dave, what I wanted to ask you, we were just talking about this new Tory government plan to introduce legislation which will affect virtually all of the sectors which you work in. So the food industry, the farming industry, they're likely to be taking back these powers in order to make sure that whatever Scotland does in legislative terms on these subjects is supposed to not affect adversely any other part of the UK. How much concern do you think there is amongst the farmers at the moment, Dave, about this kind of interference? Dave? I think we've lost our link with Tucker. I'm sorry. Chris, we'll come back to you in a moment. I'd like to press on with the second part of this story, if I may. And that is that Michael Russell has set out a plan to protect devolution and to replace the UK government's post-Brexit internal market law. And speaking ahead of today's Joint Ministerial Committee on European Negotiation, Constitution Secretary Mike Russell said that he would be setting out a plan which would protect devolution and replace the government's proposed post-Brexit internal market law. The Scottish Parliament last month voted to reject the UK government's proposals because they would fundamentally undermine legitimate devolved policy choices. Mr. Russell said that he would be pressing the UK government to commit instead to speeding up progress on a revised Common Frameworks delivery plan, which the UK's 4 governments have already agreed. The Common Frameworks plan is based on the idea of partnership and agreement rather than imposition. And I welcome the good progress the framework's development, which shows the UK government's internal market proposals are unnecessary. Now, hopefully, I can finally get back to Day. Can you hear me all right, Day? Okay, we seem to have lost the sound on your feed, Day. We'll come. Okay, I think we're having some technical difficulties with the sound. We're having trouble hearing Day Tucker at the moment. We're just waiting to try and establish a link again with Day Tucker. We'll come back to Day just shortly. Day, are you able to hear me now? We still don't seem to have any sound at the moment. Chris, if I can come to you just for the moment to fill in as we've got this technical difficulty. So Mike Russell has come up with basically an alternative plan, it seems, to the British government's idea, and actually utilising something which had already been agreed between the 4 governments. Surely this is a much more sensible idea than introducing some new power grab.
Well, anything that Mike Russell comes out with is always very sensible indeed. It's just down to as to whether the UK government will accept it. You know, because they won't want to be seen to be, shall we say, bending the knee at Scotland's behest, and they will not want to give us anything extra. That's for sure. But you know, common sense has to prevail, hopefully, at some point in time. And you know, the one thing that I'm a bit sad about is the fact that Mike Russell has indicated that he's not going to re-stand again in 2021.
Yeah, it seems a shame that.
Mike, it really is. You know, I mean, Mike has been a stalwart in the defence of Scotland. You know, when he's been in meetings with the Westminster government. So it'll be a sad day when we lose Mike, but it is down to the willingness of Westminster, Gordon, and if they are willing to concede on the proposals that Mike has made. It's interesting that you say that this set of frameworks has actually been sort of like agreed in principle
Yes.
by the rest of the devolved nations. So you know, that would say to me that they really don't have anything to carp about. You know, if there's already an agreement in principle. So
of course, the framework idea, Chris, was to make sure that all of the 4, if you want to say, the 4 nations of the United Kingdom, that all of the food suppliers and the farmers and everybody else were all operating to similar standards, and surely that is all it's needed.
Well, of course, you know, I mean, that's all that's needed. But you know, I mean, Scotland has always been strong in the fact that you know that we would like to see an enhancement to our immigration powers. We would also like an enhancement to the powers of borrowing. We don't want to see any diminishment of the already a trade union bill that has got more holes in it than Liberty Valance.
Yeah. Chris?
So, you know, we don't want to see any further erosion of any terms and conditions that will affect workers' rights.
Chris, how much would you say that this new British government bill is in response to perhaps a fear of an independence referendum next year? Do you think this is just their knee-jerk reaction to that?
Oh, undoubtedly, Gordon. Undoubtedly. You know, I mean, you only have to look at the daily media, you know, social and otherwise, just to see how much that the UK government are actually mincing themselves. You know, I mean, I was on the Business for Scotland website the other day, and it was suggesting that independence has shot up in the last couple of weeks to 63%.
Yes, there's been a number of polls, of new polls, both indicating a rise in support.
No, this is a new poll. You know, the facts are there. People just need to go, you know, Business for Scotland is a wealth of information. I would urge all the viewers to go and have a look at the website. It's absolutely fantastic. And it's not written in any such way of a bias or anything like that. It's
just the facts, isn't it? Yeah,
it's just portraying the facts, and and people don't accept it because it's not readily available on mainstream media.
It's always a sad thing. Speaking of mainstream media, Chris, actually leads us nicely into our next story. And that is that the new BBC boss says that staff should not air their views on social media. The new boss of the BBC told staff that they should not air their own political views on social media because they risked damaging the British broadcaster's reputation for impartiality. Tim Davie, who's 53, who became the corporation's 17th Director General on Tuesday, said that too many of its audience thought the broadcaster was shaped by a particular perspective. If you want to be an opinionated columnist or a partisan campaigner on social media, then that's a valid choice. But you should not be working at the BBC, he said on Thursday in his first speech to staff. Davie, the former Conservative Party candidate, was appointed to the UK's most high-profile media job to secure the future of the corporation at a time when its universal funding model is under attack. He said, for the avoidance of doubt, that he did not want a subscription BBC that served the few, even if he suspected that it could do quite well in certain parts of the country. He was committed to a publicly funded BBC, he said, but it had to reflect all political views across the United Kingdoms, plural, and all age groups. Now, I'm hoping that we now have Day Tucker. Hopefully you can hear me, Day, and I can hear you this time. We're still lacking some sound, amazingly. I think, Chris, I'll come to you while we sort this issue out. Obviously, we're having a severe technical difficulty with the line there. So, Chris, I heard you laughing, actually, just now when I was quoting the new Director General's comments about bias and about impartiality. Do you think that his comment today is somewhat ironic?
Ironic is one of the superlatives that you could use, Gordon. Yeah, you know, I mean, I came across a video. My son showed me a video the other day there of a comedian. They were talking about the fact that he doesn't want any lefties doing comedy because
I heard that as well.
Lefties inherently want to take the mick out of the Conservatives.
Well,
I mean,
that
if
would be
this
the
was
end
back,
of if I got news for you, probably then, wouldn't it?
well, yeah, you know, I mean, if you go back to the mid '80s, you know, when we had spit and image and things like that, you know, obviously was a source of merriment and mirth. But you know, I mean, basically, they're saying, and they are now categorising that if you're against Brexit, you must be a lefty. If you sympathise with refugees, you must be a lefty.
Yeah.
If you are not with the government programme, you must be a lefty. Therefore, lefties don't have any more rights. So I think we should set up a campaign that should go along with the hashtag of lefties lives matter, or lefties voices must be heard.
Yeah.
You know, because what they're trying to do is they are trying to crowd out any alternative voice and any contradictory voice
Yes.
in order to try and get back to the staid narrative of the 1950s, where you know you had to have a BBC PR voice in order to be
Of
on the
course. Yes, that was the
BBC.
way it was.
You know, one had to speak, you know, with a plum firmly in one's mouth.
Received pronunciation.
So yeah, and you know, I find it bizarre. Unfortunately, I've got you know, Jackie Brambles has taken over one of the daytime slots and broadcast on BBC Scotland, and she doesn't have the unionist finesse of Kay Adams.
No.
Because you know, I think that she's just new to Scotland. She's new to sort of like Scottish politics, and she doesn't know how to you know deliver that killer BBC stab wound into the heart of the SNP. Whereas Kay Adams, you know, has got it down to a fine art, and it's any SNP bad story will do. You know, in order to fill out our 2 hours on the airwaves.
Well, Chris, so to sort of summarise, you believe the appointment of this new Director General is a political move by the Conservative Party to seize control of the media, or the message
Undoubtedly,
that the
Gordon.
media gives.
Well, not only that as well. You know, there's the heavy chat about the BBC licensing fee. There's a chat about you know, like breaking up the way that the BBC is funded, and they desperately don't want to do that. My God, they've just fought tooth and nail in order to be able to sing "Land of Hope and Glory" and "Rule Britannia" at the last night of the proms. They are not going to allow the BBC to go to hell in a handbasket under some you know, lefties administration. So yeah, by God, that's what they've done.
Well, it'd be a great loss, I think, Chris, if the BBC loses its lefty balance and we lose some of the very high quality comedic talent that they currently have, who probably will be running for the exits when they hear this. Anyway, I'll need to move on to our next story. Chris, this is one I know that will interest you greatly. The European Union has rejected a UK proposal for reuniting child asylum seekers. The European Union has rejected the UK government proposal for a system to reunite children seeking asylum with their families in the UK or Europe, prompting warnings that more young people will risk their lives in dangerous channel crossings. The UK government had proposed a post-Brexit agreement to continue transfers of unaccompanied child asylum seekers to families living either in the UK or the EU, although with no obligation on either side. An EU official said that the European Union's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, would not take this forward as part of the current talks due to end in late October, because this is not in the EU mandate. The European Union states have shown little appetite to rewrite Barnier's mandate on child asylum seekers because they perceive the British plan as offering little. It doesn't bring much added value. We suspect it's more about sending people back, said a second EU official. who added that any way forward was likely to be via bilateral agreements between the UK and individual EU states. The European Union rejected a broader migration pact, including adults, for similar reasons. Chris, I think this really signals perhaps that the European Union doesn't believe that the British side is intending to do this for the right sorts of reasons.
Well, I hate to say that, it's high time that the European Union woke up and smelt the coffee anyway. Because, for the last 10 years, Britain have wanted to wash their hands of refugees, whether they be in Greece or whether they be in France. I was really glad that we've come on to this point, because I wanted to make the point about Gary Lineker. The MP, Lee Anderson, I can't remember his constituency, but basically goaded him into taking a refugee into his home. Fair play to Gary Lineker. He stood up and he's registered with the Refugees for Homes charity, and he's actually doing it. But bear in mind, and I want to put that warning out, that everybody should be aware of the fact that the way that the right-wing media work, it won't be long before they turn around and they start calling Gary Lineker a white saviourist, for doing so. Yeah. That is how nasty and that is how carnacious that the right-wing media is down in England.
We have seen and heard, Chris, stories of vigilantism in Kent, where people are actually going down to the beaches and harassing and even physically assaulting some migrants, some asylum seekers who are trying to get out of boats onto the beaches.
It's absolutely horrendous to hear that, and it's also more horrendous to the fact that you've got somebody who is gainfully at large. And I'm talking about a certain Nigel Farage, who is, able to walk up and down the beaches with binoculars, and people behind them, basically refugee spotting. That is absolutely horrendous, and I think that the police should actually move him, physically, because he's not serving any purpose whatsoever. Apart from gaslighting the British media and whipping them into a fever pitch over the fact that a boat maybe of a dozen people are coming in, but they're turning their eyes blind to the fact that there's nearly 200 Palestinians getting shot on a daily basis in the Gaza Strip, and they're still not doing anything about that.
Well, Chris, thank you for your comments. I'm going to move the programme on a little now. And another EU story, actually, this time, but to do with COVID-19. The European Union is hopeful that that first vaccine doses will come by the end of this year. The European Union hopes that it will get 30 million doses of a potential COVID-19 vaccine by the end of the year. The first batch in a deal struck with the UK drug maker AstraZeneca, a European Commission official said on Thursday. Assuming one dose per person, such a batch would cover 6 to 7% of the EU population. The European Commission has made £300 million down payment to AstraZeneca to secure at least 300 million doses of its potential vaccine, with an option to buy a further 100 million doses. We want all the member states to have the same price, but also to have the vaccine at the same time. It means that, for instance, AstraZeneca, we will have to, I would say, at the end of this year, a certain number of doses, hopefully 30 million doses, the official said. These doses will be distributed pro rata among the member states, and so on and so forth, until we get a total of 300 million doses to which we have negotiated. The official noted that the European Commission itself would not own a single vial. The EU's 27 member countries, which all have opted into the deal, would have to purchase the doses. and they would decide themselves who to vaccinate first. Brussels is also in advanced talks with Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, Moderna, and CureVac for their potential vaccines. Now, Chris, we hear stories about vaccines, and we also hear stories that a vaccine for a coronavirus would be a particularly difficult ask. This sounds like encouraging news from AstraZeneca and the European Union, but not really much help to the UK, is it?
Well, quelle surprise. We hear weekly now that there are being medical advances and stuff like that, and whilst they're welcome, we have to be mindful of the fact that they are, at least 6 months away. I did hear of one civilian pharmacist in America who reckons that he's developed a vaccine all by himself.
Well, that would be interesting, Chris, if it can be substantiated.
No less.
Chris, if you don't mind, I'd like to try and bring Day back into the conversation. I understand we've now got a stable link with Day, so hopefully, Day, you're hearing me all right.
I've always been able to hear you.
It's just we couldn't hear you, Day. Well, listen, I'm so glad we can hear you now. I'm not sure how much of this story you heard, but apparently the European Union has negotiated a deal with the British company to provide a vaccine, and it looks like they might be getting doses by the end of the year. It sounds like great news.
Yes, absolutely great news. I just wish my internet was a bit more stable.
That's one of the drawbacks, Day, isn't it, of living in a remote area? But listen, we're glad to have you back, and we'll involve you a little bit more in the next few stories, I hope, as well, Day. So sit tight.
Don't worry.
Okay, well, we're going to move on now to the next story, which... Hello? Sorry, Dave. Did I interrupt you there? I beg your pardon.
That's okay. I was just saying, Chris has been absolutely brilliant and filled the gaps unbelievably much better than me.
Yep, Chris is the polyfella of television. He's amazing. But Dave, I also wanted, I never got the chance to ask you for your reaction to the news of this power grab that is going to affect farmers and food producers. How do you think it will affect sheep farmers? Will it make much difference to you?
Yes, but as I say, we've known about this since the Brexit vote. And Farmers for Yes and all the farming leaders have been warning about it. So it's nothing new. It's just that now here we have it. There was an NFU, meeting a long time ago, and Ruth Davidson came in and she told us about this single market, and all the farmers were gobsmacked. But they didn't really think it would come to anything.
No?
And it has.
So the reaction to it by the farmers at that time was what, a lot of eye rolling? Was it not actually believing that it would happen?
Yes. I think they were in denial.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, thank you for that, Dave. I'm glad we finally managed to get you involved in that particular item. Now, we'd like to move on to our next story, and this comes from Lithuania. Lithuania wants the European Union's leaders to discuss the Navalny poisoning at their next summit. Lithuania will ask European Union leaders to discuss the poisoning of the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny in Russia at their next summit. President Gitanas Nausėda said today. Navalny, who's in intensive care after being airlifted from Omsk to a Berlin hospital, was poisoned with a Soviet-style Novichok nerve agent in an attempt to murder him, according to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel on Wednesday. Lithuania will definitely be among those calling for this question to be discussed. It's extremely important, especially in relation to what is happening in Belarus, Nausėda told reporters in Vilnius. A lot of factors point to involvement from the highest levels of government. Meanwhile, the German Green Party called on Angela Merkel to end her support for the joint German-Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline project to pressure the Kremlin into answering allegations over what Merkel called the silencing of Navalny with Novichok nerve agent. This openly attempted murder through the Kremlin's mafia-like structures should not just worry us, but it needs to have real consequences, said Katrin Göring-Eckardt, the co-chair of the Greens in the Bundestag. Now, let me come to you, Dave, so that we can involve you in this. Now, you'll know about the poisoning of Mr. Navalny. The German medics who were treating him have now identified the agent as Novichok, which seems to be the signature at the moment for any dissident who's to be attacked in this way. How are we supposed to interpret this? Is this just a warning to all dissidents, or is this some other kind of subtle message, do you think, that Mr. Putin wants to send out?
Well, I think he's past the stage of having to be subtle about anything. And yes, it is a clear warning. But I'm in the middle of reading the Russian report, and it's quite clear that our government has been sleeping on the job. And although they're beginning to tackle some of the dangers just now, it's taken them an awful lot of years. And the Russian influence has integrated not just into society, but into our businesses. So, I don't know who knows, it may be somebody in Britain again that'll get targeted.
Well, we certainly, Dave, when the Skripals were poisoned in Salisbury recently, the two Russians who were identified as having been in the area at the time also turned out to be Russian agents eventually. But of course, the Kremlin just keeps saying it wasn't us, and it seems that there is actually no consequences to them. And surely if this Nord Stream pipeline, which is going to, I think, double at least the supply of Russian gas into Europe, was cancelled, that would certainly get Mr. Putin's attention.
Yes, it might. What strikes me is the parallel between Boris Johnson and his government and Putin and his government, in that both seem to be untouchable. They can more or less do what they want. And they both lie.
But also, I don't know about you, Dave, but I'm not aware of any big response from Boris Johnson yet, not as far as I'm aware anyway, and certainly not very much from Mr. Trump, who seems to be campaigning for his own re-election and is not really keeping his eye on things either. But you're saying basically that you believe the British Secret Service, the British intelligence agencies have not been doing their job right.
They haven't been able to do their job right. According to this Russian report, they've had funding taken away and they have shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And apart from anything else, there are so many different groups of them. And none of them have any real powers to do very much.
I see. So you feel that maybe that, as far as it goes in the United Kingdom, there aren't really any teeth in these in these institutions, that they don't have any way of making sure that they have enough funding, that they do have the personnel to look out for these things and to monitor the situation.
That's certainly the response from the report. That's what they've discovered.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave. Chris, over to you for this one. The poisoning now seems to be Novichok again, which is part of a family of reagents which attack the nervous system. Now, my understanding of these things is that Novichok can actually be made from what they call precursors, which are basically chemicals that you can obtain almost anywhere in almost any country. So it's very difficult to trace this particular toxin. How on earth are they going to try and find out who did this in the first place?
Well, it's going to be very difficult to pinpoint one particular person. Russia has been. Russia has always been great at, shall we say, avoiding the truth.
Yeah.
But
or avoiding responsibility.
Well, that as well, yeah. But everything points Everything points to the Kremlin. But the problem with the Kremlin is the fact that nobody actually knows who is actually in the Kremlin, with the exception of Putin. I mean, they still use a system where numbers are used instead of names, and it's a whole different ball game in there. When it comes to international espionage.
Yeah.
So it seems to be a trend that they are using Novichok as their favoured weapon of deployment. If if the finger of blame has been pointed once before, then the obvious thing to do is to point the same finger, in the same direction. So, it will be interesting. But again, going back to the calls from the German Greens, with regards Angela Merkel pulling out of the pipeline, I would fully augment that call, and you have to bring unity in your own unity in your own country before you try and broker unity in any other.
Okay. Listen, Chris, I'm sorry I have to cut across you there to end that story. We've got too much still to go. And now we're moving across the Atlantic Ocean to the American presidential campaign. Donald Trump has apparently encouraged his supporters to try to vote twice. The US President Donald Trump has urged residents in a critical political battleground of North Carolina to try to vote twice in the November the 3rd election, once by mail and once in person, causing uproar for appearing to urge a potential act of voter fraud. Let them send it in and let them go vote, Trump said in an interview on Wednesday with WECT television in Wilmington, North Carolina. And if the system is as good as they say, then obviously they won't be able to vote in person. Trump has repeatedly asserted without evidence that the mail-in voting system expanded in some states because of the coronavirus pandemic would increase fraud and disrupt the November election, although experts say that voter fraud of any kind is extremely rare in the United States. Voting more than once in an election is illegal, and in some states, including North Carolina, it's a felony not only to vote more than once, but also to induce another to do so. The ballots are due to be mailed in North Carolina on Friday. This is an interesting story. Donald Trump, again, trying to sow the seeds of doubt in the electorate of the United States about the safety of their votes. Why is he doing this, do you think?
Oh, goodness. What a daft question. At the last election, when he got voted in, there was voter fraud, as far as I understand. And it was to do with the postal votes. Now, Kelly McBride and I had a wee discussion on Twitter this evening about voter fraud. And I said, well, how do we know if I send my postal vote in, how do I know that it actually gets there?
Yeah.
And the only response was, but I've been to everything should be fine, and we're dubbed if the UK government is guilty of any voter fraud, etc., etc. However, here you have this president over there who's saying to people to vote twice. Now, don't I recall Jackson Corlaw, whether it was by mistake or just by stupidity, but he did vote twice at one of the most recent elections. I can't remember which one.
Right,
and he had to apologise for it.
And of course, if Donald Trump's to be believed, according to him, if the system works, then anybody who votes twice, their second vote wouldn't be counted. And that was, he says, proof that the system works, or if they did count, that it doesn't work. But surely asking people to experiment with their vote like this is not only a crime, it's also a complete waste of people's votes.
Yes, absolutely. And it's going to make people doubt the whole system again. And democracy being torn up. The trust has gone.
Yeah. And you think maybe Donald Trump is actually deliberately trying to sow distrust so that people don't trust the election. So if Donald Trump doesn't win, that there's going to be some kind of recount?
Yes, absolutely. The whole mechanism of this, whether it be Donald Trump or Boris Johnson, they're part of the cabal who are trying to disrupt and create confusion and distrust amongst the electorate.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you, Dave. Dave, if you don't mind, and Chris, if you don't mind, I'd like to move on to the next story, and I'll involve you in this one in a moment, Chris. There's to be a positive change in internal migration. People moving from the rest of the UK have boosted the population of Scotland by 137,000 over the past 2 decades, according to a new report. The expert advisory group, the EAG on Migration and Population Study, found that the historical trend of Scotland being a nation of net population outflow has been reversed. The out-migration rates, especially those in the late 20s and early 30s, have significantly declined over the past decades, indicating an increased likelihood that students from Scotland and the rest of the UK staying in Scotland after their studies. While most big cities, except Edinburgh, experienced negative net migration with the rest of the UK at the beginning of this century, those patterns have changed. All cities, except Aberdeen and the surrounding areas, now receive more migrants from the rest of the UK than they lose to the rest of the UK. The report also highlights that an increased collaboration between local authorities and national government is key to ensuring policy initiatives to tackle population challenges, such as the local schemes to encourage inward migration, are effective. The Migration Minister, Ben McPherson, welcomed the report's findings, but warned that Scotland still faces population challenges against a backdrop of a record low in the birth rate. Chris, let me involve you in this. This is migration of a very different kind, isn't it? This is migration within shall we say, within the borders of the United Kingdom. And it seems now that there are more people migrating into Scotland than are leaving. And this basically flies in the face of what we have expected in previous years.
Well, it also flies in the face of the fact that Scotland is not a welcoming and inclusive country. And it certainly isn't anti-English or anti-Welsh or anti-Irish. So this must stick in the craw of any unionist think tank who would like to purport otherwise. I obviously I welcome its findings, but it still doesn't go far enough. You will not be surprised for me to hear me say that. Scotland could still take more migration, and I'm happy to tell the viewers that the refugees that I have engaged with in France and Belgium, do have skills that would ultimately benefit Scotland and Scotland's communities. I have spoken to teachers, I have spoken to dentists, mechanics, songwriters,
and this is
a plethora of people.
Okay.
So, whilst we can only draw on the inward British migration, there is still a need for outward migration. Coming into Scotland and giving into the communities and also giving into the economy and making a valuable contribution.
Chris, thank you for that. Dave, I'd like to involve you in this conversation as well. This is a study on migration within the boundaries of the United Kingdom. Why do you think it is that Scotland has suddenly become such an attractive place for people to migrate to from other parts of the United Kingdom at this exact time?
Forgive me, Gordon, but that's a daft question. Why would they not? It's so much better up here, better quality of life. We all care for each other much more than they seem to do down south. It's a sort of win-win for Scotland.
Well, I must say, in my own daytime job, I do meet a lot of migrants who come from England into Scotland. And some of them have migrated into England first. But of the English migrants that I've met, virtually all of them seem to back independence, which I find quite amazing, surprising even. What do you think, Chris? Is it surprising that people who migrate to Scotland might be in favour of independence?
Well, no, I mean, it isn't surprising at all. Do you know what I mean? And I find it laughable on social media, especially on Twitter, when I mean, even if you were to suggest to a person from another part of the UK that they are a migrant into Scotland, they would be offended if you use that word. So why is it not offensive to use it for the poor souls that are stuck in Calais or in Belgium? But the point that I was wanting to make, which is a curious one, because I left college in '86. That's 1986, folks.
Yeah, I thought that, Chris.
And I went down to Liverpool, and I stayed in Liverpool. I migrated over to North Wales, learned how to speak a bit of Welsh. Then I migrated down to the leafy suburbs of Surrey, and learned to speak English. And then migrated all the way back up to Glasgow and stuff
Chris,
like that.
Chris, your story is going to be familiar probably to millions of Scots, particularly in our age group, because I did the same thing. Having left college, I migrated to Manchester. But in those days, it was because there weren't the jobs in Scotland back then, Chris, though, were there?
Well, no, there wasn't, no, but there was obviously, and Glaswegians all over, according to Billy Connolly, have always looked upon the Clyde and just wondered what is beyond our, dear green place, and Scots are apt to wonder. But equally, then that leaves gaps in the community for other people to migrate into. Now, I have been on many and on all under one banner march with the, yes, Dumfries and Galloway, yes, English Scots for yes, and all the rest of it, Germans for yes. All there are all these groups who would absolutely confound the right-wing media if they were ever shown their banners, because it shows exactly the fact that Scotland is a welcoming country. It has got a healthy Polish community. It's got a healthy Chinese community. Obviously,
it does. Yeah, it's well established too.
These are all well-established communities. I mean, Glasgow was born on Irish immigration. During the famine. So I mean, anybody who would want to try and contradict these new findings, must be seriously off their heads.
Okay, Chris, listen, I'll leave it on that note. We've got a couple more items to go. I'll involve you in a moment, Dave. So our next story, £4 million is to be made available for the technology sector. 5 technology hubs will be established with £4 million to support the next generation of Scottish startups. This initial funding, announced today by the Finance Secretary Kate Forbes on a visit to Code-Based Technology Incubator in Edinburgh, will invest in critical infrastructure, enabling the hubs to give entrepreneurs world-class training and mentoring alongside the chance to network and share ideas. The hubs, announced in response to the entrepreneur Mark Logan's review of the sector, will be known as Tech Scalers and will be tasked with supporting at least 300 startups by 2025. The Scottish Government is also setting up an ecosystem fund to make strategic investments in the sector and plans to establish a formal partnership with the technology industry to drive forward Mr. Logan's long-term recommendations. Dave, this is a good story, I think, from the point of view of Scottish business. Scotland is renowned, isn't it, for its innovation and for its keen minds. This surely must be an excellent idea for, hopefully, the future of Scotland and its new businesses.
Yes, I get really excited when I see and read things like this happening, because we all know just what a great country Scotland is and what wonderful people. You know, the assets that we have in terms of our people and their intellect is so rich, but it's not always been harnessed, and it's usually had to, as we've just discussed, had to go south to get the jobs or to get the training or whatever. I mean, I
Yeah.
was at Home with my husband, and we went out there and we made our money and we came back again and built our own business here. But it's fine for people to go away, but to have that kind of backup and training facility and hub where people can get together and share knowledge and inspire and spark off each other is just wonderful news.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave, for that. And we're moving on to our final story this evening, and help for childcare providers. Applications are now open for funding to help childcare providers meet the extra costs of complying with public health guidance. The Transitional Support Fund, part of an £11.2 million support announced for the childcare sector, will help pay for things like increased cleaning, new or additional equipment, better outdoor spaces or adaptations to buildings. The Children's Minister, Marie Todd, said, "Childcare has been central to the COVID-19 response, and I want to thank all childcare providers who remained open to provide critical childcare through the pandemic. Since the wider reopening, childcare settings have had to adapt and have been extremely diligent in implementing public health measures to reassure staff and parents that they're safe. We also know that additional cleaning and changing the layout of premises comes at an extra cost." Chris, let's hear your reaction to this, briefly, if you would.
Well, yeah, listeners won't be surprised to hear me say that I think it's a great initiative, which shows again that the Scottish Government are able to get on with the day job and actually do the things that matter to people in their communities. Because if you don't have childcare, then people can't go out to work. It's as simple as that. And it's all very well for Boris Johnson to be shouting that people need to get to work, and will Keir Starmer join me in telling people to get to work? They can't do it unless they have the infrastructure in there to start with.
Yeah.
So once again, you see joined up thinking from the Scottish Government getting on with the day job for the citizens of Scotland.
Thank you, Chris. And Day, I think I'll give you the last word, since you had such trouble getting through to us. What was your reaction to this news today about extra funding for the childcare sector?
Just another good news story from a government that cares. Simple
That was brief. That was the briefest answer I think you've given me in a long time, Dave. Thank you for that. We are sadly coming towards the end of the programme now, and of course it's my job at this time in the evening to ask you to help Broadcasting Scotland. So if you enjoy our programmes and you'd like to see more of them, why don't you help us by becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter? If you'd like to do that, you can do so by contacting us using the message on your screen there, and go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and follow the prompts, and you too can be joining Broadcasting Scotland and helping make new programmes. For me and my two guests this evening, from Day Tucker, who was a little bit late, but we got there in the end, and from our stalwart Chris McCusker and myself, a very good night to you.
Right.
Hooray!